was originally going to start with a story, a clinical story of how I became interested in this research, but instead I'm going to talk with you a little bit about a personal story. So I have been studying this issue for about 10 years now. And when I first began, I was pregnant with my first son, who is now 9. Last year, when he was in the 3rd grade, I came home and went on my computer, and my computer is the family computer. It's our home computer, which is in a public spot in our house, and our kids don't have access to computers in their rooms and do all the things that you're supposed to do as a parent in order to monitor what your kids see. And what I found when I went to Google to do something was that the last Google search, which came up automatically, was men without cocks. So wasn't quite sure where that one came from. And so I first went to my husband and asked if he had possibly Googled this, which he did, which he had not. And so, so the next is this, the next thing is it possible that my 8-year-old may have done this? And I had a range of emotions, sort of personal emotions. Again, being someone who has studied pornography and relationships, coming from a very strong feminist perspective, I had a personal, strong reaction. And I didn't want to react in a way that I thought would be very, that would shut down communications with my child. So I had to stew on it for a little bit, and I talked to my husband, and I think I also called a couple of friends in a panic and said, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And when I finally did sit down, the first was sort of information gathering. I saw this on the computer. I'm wondering if that's something that you searched for. And then also to then actually look at the sites that it was him, it was my 8-year-old, and to look at the sites that he had visited. And he had visited, in doing that, the first couple of hits on Google led to sites that were of male to female pre-operational transsexuals who were urinating on one another. So this is, to my knowledge, my 8-year-old's first introduction to visual depictions of sexuality. And so we didn't just have to have sort of a birds and a bees talk. We had to have a biology talk. How is it possible that a female can have a penis? Why do people pee on one another? In the context of sex, and what does that really look like? So that was a little bit of a heavy-duty talk to have with a 3rd grader. I hadn't, as much as I think that I'm a pretty savvy psychologist, it was something I was thoroughly unprepared to do. I like to hope that I handled it well, and I would really like to hope that this was not something that will mark him in a negative way, that in having an open discussion about sex and sexuality, that we are going to be able to talk about what it is, what it isn't, what is pornography, what does pornography say, and what are our hopes for your future. So I say that because I think that when I talk about what to do and how to move forward, I think that there is, as was alluded in the previous discussion, there is an important role about a change in the dynamic, and not just how do we stop this or change it or cut it off or ban it, but also in how do we engage in a different kind of construction of sexuality and health that will help to offset all of the messages that are being received. And excuse myself for a moment so I can grab my water. And then begin. People have been studying the effects of pornography for a long time, and in the social sciences, this research really grew up in the 80s. There are a number of different models that have been used to try to understand the effects, and a very simple and early model was the imitation model. This model posits that the way that media affect consumers of that media is in a direct way. So you see, therefore you do. There is a little bit of support for that kind of a thing. We have heard even today of talks of people being asked to perform acts that others have seen in pornography. But there's a lot of limitations to having such a simple understanding of how pornography exerts its effects. One, it requires that each person actually view the material in order to be behaving as the norm would be in pornography. It also suggests that everything that we see, every movie we attend, every song that we listen to, we would then uncritically, unthinkingly go out and behave. And that's clearly not the case, particularly if you look at the base rates for pornography use, which are pretty high. If you look at college men, there's over 80% of them who are endorsing having seen pornography within the last month. And yet not everyone is going out and raping. Not everyone is going out and beating or slapping or gagging their partner. So to have this sort of simple imitation model I think is very limiting. If this were the primary mechanism by which pornography exerted its effects, then I think the policy implications are very clear. We just need to ban it. However, I think the evidence as a whole doesn't support something so simplistic, and I think we have to have a more nuanced discussion. A slightly more nuanced model is the social learning model, and this model acknowledges that we don't behave exactly as we see others behave, but that we will do things we've seen others do if we saw the other getting a payoff for it or getting rewarded. And this model in particular was important when we started thinking about things that the feminists called the rape myth. The idea that women all really do want to be overtaken by men. So while initially they may refuse or put up a little bit of a fight, in reality they are succumbed with pleasure and end up not, enjoying this forced sex. This obviously would teach someone who is viewing the material that yes, all women really do want it, even if they initially say no, and that the payoff is both my own satisfaction as well as yours. If this were the primary mechanism by which pornography exerts its effects, then we have to say we need a new kind of pornography. We need a pornography that doesn't show violence and aggression and that doesn't show people being overpowered but ultimately liking sex. So we need a pornography where if somebody does rape, they are actually hurt by it or punished by it. Or we need a pornography that is kinder and gentler. The truth is that I think, again, this is a very limiting and unnuanced discussion about its effects, and that it's not just a kinder, gentler pornography that we need. Another mechanism is the sexual script model, and this model is a little bit more general than the two I previously discussed. It focuses more on the stories that are being told in pornography. So what exactly is it teaching us about sexuality? I think this particular thing is important to examine. What are we being taught, particularly since adolescents are some of the highest consumers of pornography, particularly internet pornography. And that's a primary place where people are getting sex education, even, as I mentioned, when they are 8. Pornography provides information about gender roles and what sexuality looks like. And the information it provides is information about sex that is with a non-partner, someone who meets conventional standards of beauty, sex where there is titillation and novelty, sex where there is some amount of force, sex in which there is very little foreplay and afterplay, very little kissing and caressing, very few compliments, sex in which insults are readily accepted and agreed upon, and sex in which slapping and gagging and choking are all part of the act. I don't know how each of you construct sexuality in your relationships. My sex doesn't look like that. My sex requires a lot more imagination, actually. And one of the reasons it does is because the person with whom I engage in sexual relations is someone who I've seen throw up when they were ill, fart on occasion. I've gotten angry at that person when they have thrown wet towels down on the floor. And I have had to fight with that person about how to parent our children or how to negotiate in-laws on the holidays. This is the same person that I need to be able to turn to and to find sexual feelings for, and he to me. So it requires us to be able to have a much deeper relationship, one in which I am not always beautiful, and I'm not always ready, and I'm not always in the mood. One in which the sexuality that we have can sometimes be very comfortable if it is predictable, can be very exciting if it is fast before the cartoons are over and the kids want breakfast. It's a sexuality that is very, very enhanced by the fact that there is a range of intimate behaviors that occur that I need to be able to excuse and not have interfere with my deep affection and sexual arousal for this man. So I think that this is important because this is not the sex that is being taught in sex education or porn. This is a sex that involves a higher amount of intimacy, a sex that involves equality, a sex that involves a deep regard for the other. Pornographic materials don't reward that sex. This is not what is being shown. So I think that the social script theory has a lot of merit. Now, I'll address what I think we ought to do with it in just a moment. There are a couple of other cognitive models that I'll describe. I am a psychologist, and that means that I do study a lot individual behavior, individual beliefs, individual attitudes, and so I probably focus on that a little more than perhaps if this was an anthropologist or sociologist giving the talk. Cognitive models that talk about the effects of media are ones that focus on how do we think about, analyze, rationalize, interpret what we see and our own behavior, and explain why the same thing, we all attend the same conference, we all maybe attend the same party, but we may all walk away with a very different sense of what is happening. And while one of us may be very stimulated and excited and feel that this was very valuable, someone else may walk away and feel that this was a waste of time. That would be explained through how the interpretations of the events occur, so our own cognitive construction. Now, the first one I want to talk about is actually from Marianne Layden, who's here today, and this is permission-giving beliefs. This model draws a lot from the alcohol and substance use literature, and permission-giving beliefs refers to any thoughts that a user or a pornography consumer may have that serve to rationalize the behavior, such as, everyone is doing it. It reminds me of when Pamela Paul mentioned having interviewed people and that the users were the ones who held beliefs such as, of course, all guys view porn. For pornography users in particular, numerous permission-giving beliefs have been expressed, such as women are not really harmed. They look like that they're being gagged or choked, but really they're fine. And I'll tell you that bloopers and deleted scenes from pornography videos serve to reinforce that particular permission-giving belief. So we recently did a content analysis of pornographic videos. I think Jill was referring to some of it when she talked about male and female directors. And one of the things that I found out was that there are bloopers and deleted scenes in porn videos, which I had no idea. So it's just like you would think it is, where somebody messes up or does something silly and everybody laughs, and they may even have little interviews with the actresses. And the idea is, I think, to reinforce the sense that nothing is happening here that is of real consequence or harm. Other beliefs that people have include things like, it's better than having an affair. Now, I've done research with women who have partners who are pornography users, and they hold some of these same permission-giving beliefs. It's some of the things that allow them to stay in a relationship, including, it's so much better that he's doing this than actually having an affair. Or, of course my guy uses porn, doesn't everyone? Or, thank goodness, given his sex drive, he is not requiring me to fulfill all of his sexual needs. So it's a real relief to me that he does this. A second cognitive model about why people use pornography and how its effects are being manifested are the perceptions of social norms. Social norms are what is done, our belief about what is done in a culture. So the social norm at a conference is to dress professionally, to come, to take notes, to ask questions, to be quiet while someone is speaking, to raise hands. We have social